Good evening. My name is Sharenda Barlar, and I'm a Spanish professor at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. The topic of my presentation is Pandemic Pilgrimage and Prairie Paths. Every summer, I direct study abroad groups in Spain and walk the Camino de Santiago with students. My area of research is the Camino de Santiago, and my colleague in the English department at Wheaton, Dr. Susan Dunn-Hensley, and I have been working on a project on pilgrimage and the English Reformation. Last year, we walked the Prairie Camino as part of our research with our friend and scholar, Dr. Allison Smith. Dr. Dunn-Hensley and I were honored to receive the George Greenia Fellowship to continue our research. In the spring of 2020, I was making plans to take students to Spain for Wheaton in Spain with hopes of walking more of the Camino, walking St. Cuthbert's Way in England, and focusing on archival work. I had also been awarded a sabbatical for the fall 2020 school year. So I was scheduled to walk parts of the Kumano Kodo in Japan with a colleague for an upcoming seminar that I would teach. For my hyper-structured, scheduled personality, everything was working out perfectly. Dr. Allison Smith and I met up in Lake Tahoe for the American Pilgrims on the Camino gathering, and although COVID was discussed, our optimistic personalities were sure we would be able to travel and meet up in Europe. Things changed quickly over the weekend, and after presenting at the conference, I made the decision to change my flight and return home on March 15th. Our governor in Illinois issued a stay-at-home order that evening. I'm sure none of us imagined that March would turn to April and May, where finally I came to the realization that there would be no travel and my research would take a very different approach last year. Instead, one by one, each trip was canceled and hopes for archival research to start my fall sabbatical diminished. What to do? Libraries were closed. Our amazing summer research assistant that we got through the college, Maddie, was not allowed to live on campus. So we had to do our meetings in Zoom. Things were looking pretty grim. And based on conversations with other colleagues, they were feeling the same feelings of loss. Scholars in pilgrimage studies have often criticized pilgrims for using technology while walking a pilgrimage route, such as the Camino de Santiago. And what you see right here is one of the days at the Prairie Camino, and it's a pretty good image of what a pilgrim is thought to look like, maybe without using technology, maybe solitary, no phones, really focused on nature, focused on time in thought, possibly meeting up with another pilgrim. Last year, at the Pilgrimage Symposium in William and Mary College, Nancy Fry, a leading scholar for pilgrimage studies, stated that technology takes away from the pure Camino experience. She advocates putting the phone away, taking a break from emails, and being present in the moment. Of course, the Turner's description of liminal space and the separation that occurs during pilgrimage has been an essential aspect of walking pilgrimage. For a brief refresher of the classic pilgrimage, here we have some characteristics of a pilgrim from Image and Pilgrimage in Christian Culture by the Turners. Number one, the destination is a place where miracles have happened, are happening, and could happen again. The pilgrim leaves the familiar home to travel to the unknown. The pilgrim walks for a period of penance that may include physical suffering. The pilgrim is never truly alone, and the pilgrim aims for a certain destination. Of course, COVID-19 forced everyone to use technology in a different way than we ever had in the past. This video presentation is proof of that. How could I foster community, gain spiritual perspective, and continue my research while in plain, flat Illinois during the middle of a pandemic? Remarkably, once the Camino de Santiago closed to visitors in March, people began walking virtual pilgrimage around their home. Dr. Dunn-Hensley and I stumbled upon an app called My Mission, Camino de Santiago. which allows pilgrims to walk wherever they are and chart their progress along the French Camino route in Spain. We began our journey on May 31st, and we did not miss a day. And here is the first postcard that we received. It says, "Bonjour, I made it to the start line and I'm ready to begin my 480-mile journey to Santiago, walking in the footsteps of the past. Time to start counting down the miles. See you at the next stop. Adieu, Sharenda." Slowly, an idea began to form. What if we could bring the Camino to our colleagues and they could share their expertise with us? For those of us who have walked the Camino de Santiago, we often find that some of the most impactful experiences are the conversations that develop between pilgrims during the journey. As our plan took shape, we put on an invitation to some of our friends, and overwhelmingly, they wanted to walk with us. We let them know that we would be interviewing them for our blog, and more than likely, there would be a stop for coffee because we're recreating the Camino. So our wonderful research assistant helped us come up with a blog that we named Sojourning Scholars. And in the blog, we shared articles and interviews with our colleagues. So we would walk with them and interview them and then publish those with their permission on the blog. And that is public now. Included in the blog are scholars' observations of pilgrimage and journey, and how those concepts are reflected in their own field of study. We're eternally grateful for the time that they've given to us and hope that these interviews and insights into our talks were an encouragement to others during this season of pandemic. Dr. Dunn Hensley and I came up with a plan for the walk. Since our app told us where we were each day, I would use that time with colleagues to tell them about the geographical or historical importance of that particular place on the Camino. Also, the app would give postcards, as we saw, of significant locations on the Camino. I often shared stories with them about food and showed them photos of where we would be during that stage. Also, our research assistant created questions to ask each participant, which she emailed out to them ahead of time. I wanted to make sure our conversations were free-flowing, so it was important for them to see the questions ahead of time and to be able to guide the conversations themselves. We walked about 5 miles or so each day, and we tried to choose a different route to give the feeling of movement and change. So we interviewed a variety of colleagues from all different departments and studies. This was an interview that we did with our provost through Wheaton College, and she is a psychologist. So some of these questions were really impactful for us personally, things that we thought that we had never thought of when we were thinking of pilgrimage. So a couple of the questions I wanted to pull out a few so you could see them. Do you know of any psychological reasons for why people are so drawn to pilgrimage in modernity? Things that she had looked at, she focuses on organizational psychology and how slowing down and meditating can be good. So our research assistant had found a Cambridge study that found that anxiety and depression levels among physically ill people who had embarked on a pilgrimage were significantly lower than a larger population of unwell individuals. Do you think there's a link between nature, meditation, psychological well-being? So this was also really enriching for them in their field of study and gave us a wonderful opportunity to bring our expertise in pilgrimage and what we know in pilgrimage and link it with their field of study. Here are some other questions that came up. What are your thoughts on the connection between physical movement and spiritual and emotional development? We also talked with a theologian, and I'm only using a couple just because of time. She is not only a theologian, but she's also, she focuses on the feminine and the female in theology. So we combined some of those questions. So the first one, for example, what are your thoughts on the widening of the theological positions of pilgrims who have embarked on religious pilgrimage, Catholic, Protestant, spiritual seekers? Do you think this widening reflects trends in our global society at large, or is it indicative of some other shift? thinking about Reformation and physical pilgrimage. And so these are questions because Wheaton is an evangelical school, it's Protestant. So how does a Protestant embark on pilgrimage? And we wanted to bring out that conversation in the interview. Also, since we walked in different stages, this is an image of the prairie paths that are right around where we live. As you can see, all of these lines are connections. The red lines are all different paths. And so we try to take a different path every time to give the sense of a movement like we were on the Camino. So we wouldn't be seeing the same tree every single time, or we would not be seeing the same town. So we did this purposely because people started walking with us on a regular basis. Even after they were interviewed, they wanted to stay on this pilgrimage, partly because they wanted to hear others' conversation and get to know their colleagues better and their areas of research, but they also just really enjoyed the idea of being out in nature during a shutdown time. Honestly, these paths were also new to me because I tend to be out of the country during the summer. Each path became sacred and embodied our pilgrimage as we virtually walked the Camino. I recorded every conversation with our colleagues, and they expressed gratefulness at being able to share their research and learn from us. Since we were also living in political unrest and uncertainty within our country, we took time to pray together and discuss our concerns. Much like the Camino, people began opening up immediately to share deep conversations and topics. Conversations that may have been uncomfortable in normal settings became easy and fluid while we were facing our path and walking in the same direction. In addition, we learned personal things about our colleagues and became really good friends, things we had not anticipated. So here are a few of the conversations and a few of the people who we walked with. Of course, at the end of every walk, we would enjoy some kind of refreshment and café con leche or, an Aquarius, those of you that have been on the Camino, a Gatorade or something like that. At the end of every route, we would enjoy our time with each other. The American Pilgrims on the Camino has an active chapter in Chicago, and we took the opportunity to meet up with them for monthly hikes as well. There, we shared our past experiences on the Camino and hopes for a return. On St. James Day, July 25th, I invited a few faithful pilgrims to enjoy Tarta de Santiago with me and some other traditional Spanish food. Dr. Dunn Hensley and I officially finished our virtual Camino de Santiago on September 16th and received a finisher medal. So wanted to show a few pictures of the pilgrims that decided to walk with us on a regular basis and what it looked like in what I thought was plain, flat Illinois. Here we are with our provost and one of our biology professors. This is clearly summer. This is the plains in summer in Illinois. Here is one of our anthropology professors walking with us. Here is the chair of my department in modern and classical languages walking with us today. And so this is the very last postcard that I received. It says, "I have reached the end, an incredible journey from the foothills of the Pyrenees across mountains through the medieval villages and the grandeur of the cathedral. I think I have earned a good Spanish feast whilst basking in my accomplishment." And we got our finisher email as well as our finisher medal. But we decided to keep walking. So once we received our medal, colleagues still wanted to join us. So we decided to continue walking, and we still are to this day. You can see us walking right here in the fall, and this was last week, walking in the middle of winter. Anthropology professor Dr. Brian Howell invited us to guest lecture in one of his courses, and we invited the students into our Prairie Path pilgrimage. As we shared the class, virtual pilgrimage is not a new concept. In medieval context, cloister nuns would envision a pilgrimage to Rome, or a pilgrimage by proxy was not uncommon if someone were too ill to take the journey. This pandemic has changed my perspective regarding pilgrimage. I continue to walk my path for renewal, and the silence is a welcome change to the noise of social media and virtual Zoom classes. I look forward to seeing you all next week while we discuss on Zoom the presentation, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you very much.